Welcome back. Everybody knows that every month or so it seems like we're telling you about the storm of the century. But instead of these punishing storms pounding parts of the United States and the world every century, hence the storm of the century, they seem to be happening more and more often. What's to blame? Well, some say climate change, but the cause really doesn't matter. What matters is, are you prepared for the worst? I am joined by the Ebru think tank, Meghan McPherson, Assistant Director, Center for Health Innovation at Adelphi University, Joyce Sagi, also known as Jersey Joyce, founder and CEO of Disaster and Risk Associates, LLC, Dr. Jackie Guzda, known as Connecticut Jackie, media professor at Western Connecticut State University, and joining us live via Skype is Cameron Lewis, program manager from Points of Light. Now, we have had a horrific month here. When you look at what happened down in Dallas, it looked like Armageddon was taking place. Absolutely. I'm going to go around the panel quickly and ask you, what should the average person do who is watching this to be prepared for the next storm of the century that could happen next week?
Right. So I think the thing is kind of getting out of the vernacular, the storm of the century. It's going to keep happening. It's going to be more often. We often get ready for the big storm, right? We're all waiting for the hurricane, but these are unnamed storms. It's just a rainstorm, and it's completely flooding out Houston, flooded out Jersey last week. We have to think of it as getting ready for no matter what is happening. So it's the end result. It's all hazard, as we call it in emergency management. So are you ready for flood? Doesn't matter what causes the flood. If it's the storm of the century, a hurricane, storm surge, just know what to do when there's a flood, know what to do when there's fire, know when your family is, know where to meet, know where your medications are. It's all that basic kind of preparedness that it doesn't matter what causes it.
I'm going to get more into depth in just a second. Jackie, you have lived through Superstorm Sandy and a couple other storms. What's your takeaway from all of this? What do you think viewers need to know?
Look, I live on a little island that's about 1.5 miles long, and you have a bay on one side, you have Long Island Sound on the other. Awesome. And so as soon as I bought my house, I bought flood insurance, even though it was not required at the time. But
is it costly?
I have a 1-bedroom cottage, not even a house, and it cost me about $2,000 a year. Right. But after Hurricane Sandy, the city of New York redistricted all of the flood areas. Now everybody is required to have flood insurance.
So did that mean your premium went up or down?
FEMA redid the flood maps actually using a digital GPS kind of based system now that they didn't have before. It used to be literally from the overview from a plane taking pictures.
So now they know who's greater at risk and who should pay through the teeth, like Jackie is. That's what happens when your government gets involved. Free markets, Jackie.
But they did replace the roof on my house after
That was nice.
That was well
no
worth
blue
the
tarp.
$2,000
So,
a year
yeah,
or more.
exactly.
So you were lucky. You got your house. You got your roof replaced. There's a lot of places in New Jersey that they're still in shambles.
Joyce, money must be pouring out of somebody's ear because the federal government alone put $60 billion into Superstorm Sandy relief.
Thank you.
I think that's enough to make everybody hit by the storm a millionaire.
You're right, and that's what the problem is. And so the premise of Disaster and Risk Associates is just that. There may be 4 phases to a disaster, but here's the bottom line. You're either in a disaster or you're not, and you should be preparing for it. Communities are not prepared. And I had the opportunity to talk to Meghan and some other folks when we were talking about this. Boston's doing things differently. New York is doing things differently. New Jersey, what's happening? Why are we not helping anybody? I was with the New Jersey project last week when we did the bus tour to talk about people not being rebuilt. 120 homes a year is not enough. There's something drastically wrong. We're not engaging the communities. We're not getting the money to, which is individual assistance, to the people where it needs to get. There's no reason that we should have all of this money and nobody can figure out how to spend it.
Exactly.
We can spend it on anything else.
Let's turn to DC and Cameron right now. Cameron, you've been listening to our conversation here in the studio. What do you think viewers need to know about being prepared for that next big storm of the century that could happen any moment?
Sure, I think the first thing viewers need to do is they need to act now. Step 1 is you want to have a plan. As we were talking about, you want to know where to evacuate, you want to know where your medicines are, you want your pets to be prepared, and you can find all of that information through websites out there like goodandready.org. Goodandready.org houses all of the disaster preparedness information from FEMA, Flash, and the American Red Cross. So you want to act now. I encourage you not to wait until you're in a disaster to figure out what you want to do with you and your family.
All right. Meghan, Are our leaders getting the message? Katrina, we were ill prepared. Sandy, we were ill prepared. This latest rainstorm in Texas, it seems like they let a prom queen drive home 35 miles in it and die. I mean, when are we going to learn our lesson?
I think it's not only, I think that the leaders are well aware of what the issue is. I think the larger issue in some of this is our aging critical infrastructure. So when we talk about resiliency, which is the big thing now, we talk about the built infrastructure, and there's also the community infrastructure we need to work in to make sure the communities are stronger to be able to come back, having that social capital that's there. But with the leaders, they were talking, the mayor of Houston was speaking, they've put 10 years of money into building up their critical infrastructure and drainage, and they still ended up with the absolute abhorrent problem that they had down there. With that aging critical infrastructure, there's no drainage the way there should be. And also, the way we are on Long Island, I'm in Nassau County, that was built up post-World War II in a way that our critical infrastructure is 60 years old, and yet we have a population that is quadruple, if not more, what we expected it to be when we built it in the 1940s. So
And no way off of Long Island either.
And no way off of Long Island.
Right.
So the way to address it, I think, is to look at the current challenges with the current population based on old critical infrastructure. And how would you deal with getting folks off of Long Island? And if you can't, which you can't most of the time, how would you deal with them sheltering in place? That's huge for families to know.
I mean, we just have to look at the Long Island Expressway. I believe it was a year ago during, was that a rainstorm or snowstorm?
Snowstorm.
That people were stuck on the highway for hours and hours and hours.
Days.
Now, at least, days in some cases, they've gotten to the point where they preemptively close the highway to keep people off those roadways.
Right.
So that's somewhat helpful.
I think it's personal responsibility as well. If someone says to you, if government says to you, you need to evacuate, you need to evacuate. Because you are putting first responders at risk when you stay in your home, even though you've been told to evacuate. So there's that as well.
There's also human nature, Jackie. So many times I say to myself, I'm going to go on the ready.gov website and see what those folks are going to tell me. Because I've witnessed numerous hurricanes, tornadoes. I mean, I've been out in it all as a journalist. Yet when it comes to preparing my own family, we don't have an evacuation plan.
I'm feeling pretty guilty.
Shame on you.
It makes me so
Shame on me, I know.
This family. But we don't, right? We're the normal citizens, and we don't have a plan. I mean, when Hurricane Sandy came, I had 3 dogs at the time, and I said, okay. And then my sister said, you must come to Manhattan now. I live on the 11th floor. I said, I'm not leaving without the cat.
I wouldn't leave without my dog.
No.
It's the same. But they're making plans now that you can take them to
Well,
shelters.
I also think that
there are mechanisms that are out there, and
Yeah.
that's what we talk about. So part of the speaking that I do is about inspiring change together. And what that means is that we all need to be engaged. Everybody has a time, a talent, a resource, something that they're able to bring to the table. And you could talk about the individual assistance and the public assistance and the infrastructure, but we're not engaging our communities. Emergency operation plans are no longer available since 9/11. They're protected under Homeland Security. If you're not going to engage the stakeholders, which is the community, you're never going to get the message out. And that, to me, when you say, are you ready again? I'm going to tell you the answer is no.
Well,
because we've not changed it, and we're not able to get the message to people, and that's the problem.
Those conversations have to happen, too, at the local level. The businesses, some of the work we're doing with the Center of Health Innovation at Delphi is we're going out and we're working actually in the town of North Hempstead, and we're bringing together all of the different stakeholders, public, private sector, to have those conversations, because no one's had those conversations before. Even post-Sandy, they weren't having those conversations.
Right.
So it's important because that's where what she's talking about comes in, is you're not changing cards at the scene, as we call it in EM. You know that Bob works down at that grocery store and he'll make sure that he's ready, that everyone can come in and get supplies. You build that beforehand.
And you have to engage the corporations.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry.
Let's turn to Cameron in D.C. Cameron, here's actually what I do. I keep a close eye on the weather if a significant storm is forecast, and I get the heck out of Dodge. So I will go north if the storm is going to be centered to the south. I go south if the storm is centered to the north, and I ride out the storm watching my TV and doing my work on my computer away from the closed roadways and the heck that happens around the nation when there's no water, there's no gasoline, and there's no electricity like we saw during Hurricane Sandy. Society melts down fast.
Right.
So tell me about this breakdown. I mean, you're ready to witness fistfights at gas stations over getting your little gasoline so you can get out of your car and get out of your town. What's your advice to folks? Okay, I think Cameron's having a little trouble.
My advice to folks is, I'm back.
Okay.
My advice to folks is to get prepared and get the resources you need to. Make sure your gas tank is filled. Make sure your bathtub has water in case there's a storm. Make sure you have an emergency preparedness kit that has 3 days of water and non-perishable food. You want to have flashlight and batteries. You want to have all sorts of supplies like medicines just in case the worst situation happens. And you're talking about public and private and nonprofit partnerships. Points of Light, which is the largest organization dedicated to volunteerism, is working with the Allstate Foundation and building 10,000 kits across America. And with that, they're actually talking to community members and saying, these are your local hazards. This is a family communication plan. Talk to your kids about where you would meet if a disaster strikes. Do they come to their house? Do they go to a library? Where are you guys going to meet? And who are you going to call that's outside of your area that everybody can check in with, just in case somebody's missing their communication? So there's a lot of great work in the field. I know we often look at the bad side of things, but I watch the nonprofit space every day, and I see community members take action, and I encourage you to volunteer. Volunteers are much more likely to be prepared for a disaster if you volunteer with a local nonprofit or disaster nonprofit.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. Cameron, thank you for your time. Joyce, thank you so much.
you.
The name of your organization again is?
Disaster and Risk Associates.
And Meghan joining us from Adelphi University. Where should people go for more information? Ready.gov is a good idea?
They can go there, and also Adelphi has adelphi.edu/CHI.
Okay, and Jackie Guzda, as always, thanks for joining us and giving us your insight and wisdom. That is it for this edition of Fresh Outlook, Everest TV talk show that does what else but help you keep your outlook fresh and informed. I'm Logan Crawford. Prove you're stronger than the storm. Prepare for it. See you next week.